Hi, I'm Michael Killen. My guest is Marion O'Leary. He's from the Carnegie Institute of Science. This is a live taping session of a film we are making called Painting to Change the World. I'd like to ask Marion some questions now about trace gases. Hi.
Good evening.
Now, am I correct? Trace gases are gases that account for no more than 1% of all the gases in the atmosphere, at least the seven miles up.
Yes, in fact, most of the time, much, much, much less than that.
Than 7?
No, than 1%.
Okay, and if I stood on my rooftop and I looked up the area that we're considering, I can see it, the length of it on a clear day.
Right, you can.
So it's not much of an area. And yet there's this tiny, 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 less than 1% of these trace elements up there, and apparently they're important. And why are they important?
They're important because a number of them could be toxic. Ones that have become important in the past have been responsible, for example, for acid rain. Several of them were responsible for the depletion of the ozone layer that happened about 20 years ago. And so a number of these very low concentration substances can be very important. They're also interesting to scientists because of what we can learn about our atmosphere.
Okay, I just want to go back to the acid rain for a minute.
Sure.
That was both an environmental disaster,
right,
and it's still continuing, I believe.
I wouldn't call it at this point a disaster. I think we've come rather far toward fixing it, but it was a problem.
Environmental and also economic.
Yes.
And you're saying there are other trace elements up in the atmosphere that hold the potential of adversely impacting our environment and our economics.
Yes.
And you feel you don't have 10,000 scientists studying these trace elements?
There are significant numbers of people studying them, but what has happened is that the ones we are most interested in have not been studied because until now there was no way to do it.
Okay, so there's new technology.
New technology, thank you.
Do I need to know what it is?
Probably not.
Okay.
Let me think of laser.
Laser.
That's a good place to start.
Okay, laser. All right, so you shoot a laser up, but okay, but what are the trace elements that exist that you and your organization feel need to be intensely studied now?
We have two that we are particularly interested in. One is called carbonyl sulfide and the other is ammonia. And each of these is present at a concentration in the atmosphere of something near 1 part per billion.
1 part per
Now
billion.
what that means is if we were to take all of the air in this television studio and pull this stuff out of it, it would occupy no more space than the eraser on a pencil. It's a tiny, tiny amount.
Okay.
And the technology for studying these things is new.
All right. I didn't hear the first one. It's carbonyl
sulfide.
Carbonyl sulfide. What possible damage can that gas trace do to us?
This is not a damage issue. This is a science issue. The question is, what can we learn about our atmosphere and what can we learn about climate change by studying this? And I will give you a very short answer. Carbonyl sulfide is a lot like carbon dioxide, except it has 1 sulfur stuck in the middle of it. And so a lot of what it does in the atmosphere is like what carbon dioxide does, but with some differences. So it's very interesting and useful to study.
How does it interact with plants?
It gets absorbed by the plants by a chemical cycle that's very much like what happens with carbon dioxide.
Oh, okay. All right, is that good or bad?
Well, it happens from the point of view of my scientist friends that it's good.
Yes.
Because it's a tiny amount, and the plant could care less. Okay, it doesn't hurt the plant, but the scientists love it because when they watch what it does and when they compare what carbonyl sulfide does with what carbon dioxide does. The comparison tells them a lot about how plants work.
Okay, and are you concerned that this particular gas is increasing in volume or is decreasing, or that's not even an issue?
It's not really an issue. It seems to be increasing a little bit, but it is so low that that's not really something we worry about.
All right, your gut tells you then if you learn more about this particular gas, a trace gas, then who knows what you're going to discover. It might be something of value.
Well, actually, we think we know what we're going to discover. My friends who work on photosynthesis talk about a word I will give you called photorespiration, which everybody's been pulling their hair out, and you know what happens with that, for many, many years. And this may be the way we finally figure that out.
Okay. The carbon that's given off from things is respiration.
Right,
okay, all right. So that sounds valuable.
It is. It's a very nice idea.
And what are you going to, ammonia?
Okay.
Why?
Ammonia is a different story. It's sort of parallel to the other story, but it's really different. The concentration of ammonia in the atmosphere is gradually increasing. It's still only something in the range of 1 part per billion. But it does interact with plants, and people are interested in understanding how that interaction works, and when do plants give off ammonia, and when do plants take up ammonia? And we don't know that at this point.
You don't know when that happens,
Right.
but if you did, what do you think you'd know?
It gives you a much better measure on basically how plants breathe. You don't think of plants breathing, but they do. They exchange gases with the atmosphere, and they will exchange ammonia with the atmosphere just as they exchange oxygen or carbon dioxide.
So if we learn more about how a plant breathes,
Right.
if food becomes a problem,
Right.
you know, overpopulation and poor land use, we might have to figure out how to help these plants breathe more effectively and grow. Is that possibly one of the reasons?
At least to understand what are the parameters that control their breathing. Yes, that's it.